Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steph. I am here with the Office of Cannabis Management, the Division of Social Equity. And as you can probably see and hear, I'm a deaf person. I use American Sign Language, and I'm here with my interpreter, Erin. So thank you to Erin for being my voice today. And my role here is the grant coordinator, and I am covering for our grant manager, Tom Rupp, who is tied up with other obligations today. So thanks so much for the team for hosting our third and final webinar regarding the CanGrow farmer training and farmer loan grants for 2025. We also have a recording online on our website if you want to watch the training as well. It's maybe a little bit less visual, but it's an opportunity for you to go back and get more information should you need that. If you want to double check your understanding, you can watch the recording that is posted on our website, which we will share at the very end. And we also have a Q&A. So if there are questions you have throughout, go ahead and post your questions in the Q&A feature up at the top of the screen where it says Q&A. We're keeping the chat quiet just for this, and then we'll hold your questions to the end. We'll get through the presentation and we can address the questions that are posted. We have a great team here with us. Amina is helping with technology and any challenges that you may have or access. I might mention again later. If more folks join, I'll probably explain again who I am, the fact that I'm deaf, I'm using American Sign Language and having an interpreter speak for me. So let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. So you may already know, but today we're here to talk about two different grants under the CanGrow program. So we have two. There's the CanGrow Farmer Loan Grant, and that is loans to help farmers enter the legal cannabis industry. And the goal really is to support farmers navigate and provide access to regulatory services. And those who express interest in community-based organizations, we want to make sure we can get them ready and get those folks ready to start marketing their cannabis products. If the farmer is already ready and they want to expand their farm, for example, avoid some cost risks, farmers, if they already are ready, this kind of helps reduce some of the compliance risks and costs associated. And if there are infractions, our program actually has two areas: the farmer loan, the farmer training grant. That's what you see on the right-hand side, and those are more those grants. The funding, they fund eligible organizations. Sorry, let me get this set up. For educational materials, training, technical support to farmers. Those who want to learn more about how to expand or enter the legal cannabis industry. We have different project categories that qualify, which I will, they're outlined in the RFP, and you can read that and learn more about what kind of projects are available or eligible, I guess, for funding. And then the grants, probably the most misunderstood of the two, because as I said, we have the grant that are direct loans to farmers. You think it's a direct loan to farmers, it's actually for nonprofits. So we want to provide low interest loans to farmers who are interested in entering, again, the market. And I'll expand a little bit more on both of these different options. So the amounts we have, the grant range is 200 to 500,000, and that is up to 5 years. The farmer training grant, that starts at 10,000 and goes up to 49,999, and that's up to 12 months. So those are two separate grants we have, different requirements, and who's eligible. They are different. So for the loan grant, those who qualify, it specifically, again, is for nonprofit organizations with agricultural business expertise, as well as project analysis skills, loan fund management experience, and capacity and experience, and also those who have close ties with the community. For the farmer training grants, that's a little bit more of a broad opportunity for different types of organizations, schools, educational institutions, other nonprofit organizations, businesses, community groups, local governments, partnerships. The community groups, if they do not have a tax ID organization, then you probably want to partner with a fiscal sponsor, fiscal agent. And then because there are some specific requirements in terms of the tax qualifications here in Minnesota. So we will give priority to certain organizations that demonstrate a history of successful training or navigating of services, specifically for farmers who have barriers to education and employment. We also consider more those who are proposing grants that happen in areas where residents are eligible to be social equity applicants or candidates. We call it SEA, social equity applicants. And if you're not sure what a social equity applicant is, we can talk a little bit more about that later on. There are a lot of misunderstandings about what makes a social equity applicant. So, eligible organizations, if you're interested in the loan grant, you need to be registered in good standing with the IRS and the Minnesota Secretary of State. Again, a nonprofit corporation. And what that means generally is that you are certified, your community developed funding institution, institution. You must be able to establish and administer a revolving loan account, have a board of directors. That does include individuals who are experienced in agricultural business development. We also want to know that you can initiate and implement economic development projects and that you have established relationships with farming communities. Now, for the farmer training grant, again, we are looking at folks that are registered in good standing with the IRS as well as the Minnesota Secretary of State and capable of helping farmers navigate the very complicated regulatory structure of the legal cannabis industry. Just reading and making sure I didn't miss anything on that one. Oops, hold on. So here at OCM, I think, people think, can I help navigate? That's a very complicated industry. And kind of what does that mean? OCM, we're trying to help folks understand a little bit about what that means. We developed a continuum of readiness, COR, we're calling it, so that you can kind of look and determine for yourself if you are ready for the cannabis industry. The CanGrow project will hopefully accelerate farmers who are able to develop those industries. We also want to help them get into the market faster. That's one of the biggest things. We want farmers to be able to enter the market and be ready to get in and develop their business. And also there are some folks who have big dreams and they want to go and they think they can jump into the cannabis industry, but they're not ready yet, or they aren't sure how to avoid some of the costs and risks and so forth. We want to reduce their risk as well as the infractions. And here at OCM, we value education. We want folks to know about the infractions because, again, it is a very complicated industry to navigate. And so some folks come in with these big dreams and they're not sure what they want to do. So we want to be able to help them actually be ready. Even if they're in the early stages of farming, we'd like to help them. So if you do get the grant, what are your responsibilities? Well, again, the CanGrow farmer loan is to those who are entering, and this is a service loan again to support legal cannabis businesses. The loan can cover things like purchasing equipment, vehicles, land, buildings, structures, and of course, just admin costs. And then really it's kind of up to you in terms of the statute says it can be up to 500,000 or up to 150 if you have a match. I want to just clarify this point again. So the loan amounts can be 2,500 all the way to 50,000, or over 50,000 again if you have a match. Then it can be up to 150. So just clarifying that. The nonprofits will develop all the different processes for recruitment, monitoring, et cetera. But there are some rules about that. For example, you can't go over the Wall Street prime rate of interest, for example. You want to make sure you keep that lender for if they have additional loans and their admin costs, of course. The principal will go back to OCM. That's a revolving loan. Also, lenders can do the origination fee, the 1% origination fee. And then once that loan has been set and approved by OCM, we can then give the money to the borrower. And of course, all the loans are decided on a case-by-case basis. And again, priority is given to farmers and communities who have been impacted disproportionately by the cannabis enforcement in the past, or who have other barriers similar to that. So just to review again, your responsibilities would be create and manage and certify the revolving loan funds, oversee the loan payment, could be any loan forgiveness as well. That may apply after 3 years of on-time payments. They may have a loan forgiveness. That's in statute as well. We want to also have you manage the application process, technical assistance, making sure that you're compliant with your reporting, which happens annually. And then once you hit the 5-year mark, we'll do performance reviews to determine if you can continue on for another 5 years. So for the training, there are 4 different categories for the training grant, and we do encourage applicants to kind of look them over, and when they want to apply, decide which one they're interested in focusing on. You can have more than one, but we want to make sure you have at least a priority area we're looking at when we're making selections. So there's cannabis specific support, like that includes things like understanding the law, 280E, risk aversion, production, management, distribution. And then another category is business planning, thinking about support for a business plan, operations agreements, HR, things like that. Working with communities. Sorry, this is the interpreter. I just missed that very last part. The community benefit agreements. For example, like if you are in an area where the community is very resistant to the idea of having a cannabis sales, we can get involved in making sure that people understand the benefits, the barriers and the benefits and so forth. So there are different things that we can consider about that. The third category is conservation as well as legal concerns, and that may be something you want to talk about. If there's a conflict with federal funding, how do we navigate that? If farmers are receiving federal dollars, for example, and there's concern about how they can use both, that your organization might be able to provide some services on how to navigate that without risk of losing your federal funding. OSHA compliance, what that looks like, environmental protections like erosion or pollution control. And then the fourth category is a big one. That's mentorship and expert assistance. So that includes networking, access to cannabis experts, support in developing SOP. What does SOP stand for? my English, sorry, now I'm realizing that English and ASL, SOP, I'm forgetting what the acronym even stands for. Scope of practice? Yeah. Anyway, avoiding predatory practices as well. So I want to talk a little bit about what this means, the target population for this particular grant. Again, farmers and farmers, obviously they're the whole reason behind it. So we do prioritize organizations that have a successful track record of Minnesota farming and those who have experienced barriers to education and employment. And that could be transportation, that could be language access, financial barriers, if you live too far away, if you have communication access, any number of things. Most important really is the core focus on individuals who have been in operations. The statute really defines social equity. The social equity applicant is a farmer who has been involved in the industry for at least 3 years. That is the important point here. So we do want to uplift those folks with our grant. So social equity applicant, again, if you're interested, there's a QR code here that will actually lead you right to the statute. So you can see a little bit more about that. Again, it's farmers who have been in operation for at least 3 years or more, residents of heavily policed communities, individuals or their relatives who have faced cannabis-related legal actions, military service members affected by cannabis-related infractions, and residents of low-income areas with a long-term presence of over 5 years, meaning they've lived in that area for 5 years or more. So if that individual wants to get into the cannabis industry, for example, we may not do that unless they may not be able to do that unless they get some assistance from, for example, a mentor or a loan officer. So how do we figure out if they're in an area that is considered social equity eligible? We want to make sure we have the right folks being served. We do have a map that's in the RFP as well. If you click on that link, you can look at your area and the folks that you serve, check on your client list, for example, and where they are located, and kind of see if it falls into the map. That's a way to kind of prove that you are, in fact, qualified and eligible for this grant. And also just a little bit too, we have some flexibility on providing the evidence that you are ready to meet the needs of the target population. So what are the eligible expenses that the grant can pay for? Equipment for project like laptops, internet, phones, perhaps, books, written materials, training expenses. That could be if you bring in like a presenter, for example, if you have materials or curriculum you need, consumables, that would be like postage and things like that. Food, beverages, for meetings, for trainings and so forth. Rental space for trainings or workshops, promotional materials, consultant expenses you might incur, and the salary for project implementation. But again, keep in the back of your mind, well, $49,000, $49.99 might not even cover one person's full-time salary. So you do need to be thinking about what your organization already has in place for that. Like if you bring in a consultant and equipment and so forth, we want to support what you're already doing with this grant. So we'll cover now a little bit about what we can't cover, what you can't cover with these funds. Everyday operating expenses that aren't tied specifically to the project that you are receiving the grant for. Infrastructure improvements, like if your building, for example, needs to be brought up to code, these funds cannot be used for that. Bonuses or staff incentives, can't use it for that. Lobbying, the purchase of land or buildings for your own organization? No. Now for the loan money, you can do that for, no, I'm sorry. The borrower can do that, but the grantee who receives the money can't be doing that. If you are paying someone to help you write the RFP, for example, that pre-award cost, you can't use that for the grant funding because it happened before the grant happened. Admin costs are capped at 10%, and that's actually fairly generous. I know you look at like accounting or other admin expenses. Revenue generating activities as well. For example, like if you develop a curriculum and then you're going to go sell that curriculum, you can't use this grant funding for that type of activity. This is our timeline. I know we're getting kind of close to wrapping up the RFP on June 3rd at 4:30 p.m. So if you have questions between now and then or any struggles, the online system, it needs to get resolved by next week, June 3rd. So after the RFP closes, well, then we start the review process. And it does take some time to read through and check and make the selection for the finalists, contact the finalists, make sure they're still interested in the offer. We do a pre-award, with a whole pre-award process. The whole thing takes a couple of months to get through all of that. And then the awards will be given out in August. And you can hopefully start the activities by September, October. That's the goal. And then get that wrapped up. Well, it's a 5-year program for the loan project, so that's long. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the loan paid off in 5 years, but it means that your project will have been completed. September, let's see, 26, 2030. Wow, that's 5 years from now. Yeah, and the training, of course, is wrapped up by next year. That's a little bit different. So a little note about your public data and your application. Once the applications are opened, your name, address, and the amount that you're requesting becomes public information. So that means, doesn't mean we're like posting it online or anything, but if someone requests it, that is public information. The rest of your application, well, it will become public after the evaluation process is completed. When you have signed a grant contract, that becomes public information as well. So, any trade secrets? Sorry, that was the interpreter. I need to clarify. Any trade secrets, if you have that on your application, definitely make a note of that because we can, if there's something that we can hold from public information, we can. We don't want to publicize that. So I want to explain now a little bit about what the application process actually looks like. And again, I'm going to emphasize trying to get it done early if possible. Get all the online things, they like to go awry at the last minute. So, not much you can do to help you. At 4:25 on June 3rd, we can't do a whole lot to help you. So if there are issues, you want to get that done, hopefully by June 2nd so that you can troubleshoot before the due date. If you go to the website, everything is listed right there that you would need. Make sure you pick the right application. We do have 2 different grants right now. This is the content overview. They're fairly similar for both grants, a little bit different questions, but overall, how things are scored are fairly similar. This includes like project description, authorized representative, that means who signs the grant agreement. There are different attestations, so like to say that, you didn't collude with other organizations. You have exhibits that you need to show, like, for example, your agreement to provide documentation upon request and things like that. And those are not necessarily scored, but if they're not included, your application may be rejected if you don't have those things as part of it. The narrative piece, that is what you are really being evaluated on with the reviewers. So the reviewers are folks who are state employees as well as community experts. So we look at the applications and see how folks are doing with their answers and if they meet all of the population requirements, and you are on the continuum of readiness, that's where we move forward. Your narrative includes like budget, if you have to upload a spreadsheet and so forth. And then that also provide a template that you can upload. We want to try to get, again, everything done before June 3rd, because if you have any issues on how to upload it and so forth, PDF, you want to get that done ahead of time so you're not scrambling at the last second. This is kind of a scoring example. We try to be fair to everyone and as objective as possible. So one example is like for our rubric, we'd like to say start at the midpoint of scores, right? So everybody, it's not like everyone's going to get a perfect score. So for example, if there's one question, how would your loan repayment process be managed to make sure your financial, recycled efficiently into future CanGrow loans or other grant-related activities. That's in the RFP. How you answer that, or maybe if you missed that or didn't answer it, you're going to get a 0 for that question. If you had like basic repayment plan and but maybe didn't have a lot of detail, you might get 1 or 2 points. If you had a very clear description of and mentioning of how you're investing the grant, and the activities and the monitoring processes, then you might get like a 3 or 4 points. But if it's absolutely perfect, where it's like you've got tons of experience, many years, you know what you're doing, you go on about that, we got a really good picture, maybe not a picture, but like if if you've got it really well crafted, then you may end up getting a perfect score on that question. So that's, perfect scores are very rare, just so you know. So when you go to the website and you look this over, you'll see lots of different materials. You can click on, for example, what does this say? I want to make sure that this is, oh yes, making sure that you're following the character limit is very important as well. Because I think, sorry, I'm gonna pull this up, it's very small. There might be a separate doc that you can prepare. It's called the application preparation document. And then if the application itself is online, for example, it's a little bit clunky to navigate. Well, it's not bad, but if it just feels clunky, you can prepare things ahead of time that you can kind of have written, an actual hard copy that you and your coworkers can use on a separate doc to kind of prepare ahead of time. And then, of course, once you do type it in the actual application, you want to make sure you have the character limit, not word limit, but it's actual a character limit. And that includes like, apostrophes and commas and ellipses and paragraphs and so forth. So making sure that you're counting the characters before you try to upload everything into the actual application, because it may get cut off if you go over the character limit when you're going from your preparation document to the actual application. The actual online, we use a platform called FormStack, and once you go in, it'll bring it all up. You sign off by the authorized representative signs on, saying that you agree to data privacy. That's obviously very important. Every time you go in, you have to re-sign in. You don't have to create a different account, but if you do want to save and continue, then you do need to have that. You'll get a link to your email to get back in. And then every time you go click that link that you get in the email, you will have to re-sign in. So I know it's a little bit like, I don't know, I would recommend you have everything 100% ready. It's just easier to actually like use the document, the separate document provided, to prepare everything, have it all ready, have your authorized representative ready to go, and then you can upload the whole thing and have them sign it, so you're not having to go back in multiple times. So the first page you see is just this basic contact information and eligibility information. It's important that you put down your main point of contact. Best practice really is that your authorized representative and the main point of contact are 2 separate individuals. It's not required, but that is considered sort of the best practice, so that it's not a one. And if you're a one-person show, I understand that too. Sometimes that's the case, but if you just have your own business and it's just you, but if it's a big organization, it is a good idea to kind of show that it's a bit of a red flag if you don't have separation of duties. So that is really helpful. Different eligibility and assurances. If you check no to a lot of these, it's possible that you may not continue. You shouldn't even continue with the applications. You can kind of see that before you go in, get everything ready, because you don't want to go, oh, I don't actually qualify for this. There are questions about, like, do you know somebody who works at OCM? That is one of the questions. And if you click yes, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be rejected immediately, but you will have to explain what your conflict of interest is to make sure that person is not, one of your reviewers, for example. So now the grant request page, this is very important. It's not scored, but this is where the piece that is going to be out to the public, right? So this is like the description of your project, what you want to maybe share with legislators, because this is obviously very important that we have a lot of folks who are interested in what's happening here at OCM. So this is a very important page. So now getting into the scoring piece. So there's a big section here. Can you do this? Do you have the capacity? Do you have relevant experience? And that's worth 30 points. What is your mission? What are your values? How does that align with the CanGrow goals? Your history of your organization, your capacity, for instance, explaining what you've done in the past. And it's possible maybe this is a little bit different, but it still aligns in some way, and that's okay. Maybe explaining that we've been doing this for 10 years and, in Colorado or something, and we want to bring this, our expertise here to Minnesota, which is, that's wonderful. Let's explain all of that. And again, character limits, but want to make sure you explain that in your narrative. Upload different forms, evidence of your capacity and expertise, and that could be different for different individuals. You have an annual report, for example, you have a sort of certificate of other previous loans. If you have what do you call it? Like if there's a video link, maybe if you have a video of your work that's out there, a curriculum you've already developed that is ready to be used, it's a place you can upload that. We also want you to upload your organizational chart and your board of directors list, especially for the loan program. We do want to see the folks who are on your board and make sure they have agricultural experience. The work plan, in the narrative, you'll explain a summary of what your work plan looks like and different milestones, who's responsible for what, who's getting training, who is, if you're not ready to provide, who's ready to provide services. And separately, but, well, what's the word? Separately, but I guess supplementary. I guess that's the right word for it, yeah. Your description and your work plan. If you're really struggling with the PDF, it's a PDF. So if you're really struggling, you can use a doc, but make sure you're just following the same format. PDF should work fine, but. And then when your work plan, you want to make sure your budget is clear, your staff time is clear, what staff is responsible for which duties. If you're developing a curriculum, make sure that your budget shows that, and it's not just like, well, I'm buying a van. What is the van for, and so forth. So we want to make sure that the budget and the work plan do, in fact, match. And keeping in mind, too, that you often think more is better, but that's not always true. Specifics, measurable goals, those are better. Timelines, successful, success, those are, what do you call the SMART goals. That's really a thing you should be thinking about here for this. And again, it's only $49,999, right? So. Another important piece, actually, this is in statute as well, is to show that you have a strong network and a network plan for the community for outreach. And what does that look like? How are you communicating with your community? What relationships do you already have? What does that look like? And are you going to be doing things online? Are you doing home visits? Are you having community events, all of those things. Can you support folks who are facing different barriers, like language access? What does that look like, for example? Do you have language services? I mean, I'm a good example. I don't know, I don't know how many deaf farmers are out there, but I know there's lots of farmers in Minnesota who use other languages. So are you sure that they have full access and understanding of the laws and rules and regulations and so forth in their own native language? Do you have media partnerships? I know that a lot of folks in rural Minnesota have unique approaches to communications and media partnership. What does that look like for you? And again, not required, but it's helpful. It's proven very helpful if you have a letter of support from the community, especially if you serve a specific population. For example, if you say, I work with Native individuals on the reservation, make sure you get a letter of support from those folks. Yeah. Next, we're talking about how we evaluate and kind of what that looks like. How do you prove, you know, where you are on the continuum of readiness and ready to show that you can be successful? How do you plan to show that your loan program will work? How do you support folks who are receiving the loan? There may be some discussion about, like, if you're getting grants from both, can you get a grant on both sides of CanGrow? You can do that as well. There are some folks who are thinking, well, I might want to do the technical assistance part as part of the loan process. That's also a possibility. And then, of course, mentioning your plan for both, of course, that's very important on the grant application. So budget, obviously, always important. What is your budget going to look like? What do you need the funding for? And does that align with the category that you've chosen? Is it reasonable? Is it necessary? Does it tie to activities? Maybe you already have funding for this kind of work. How are you making this, basically turn this into a match so that they can be fully funded? Let's see. And is it sustainable? That's another question, of course. So these are the different exhibits that you will be uploading throughout. This kind of explains each one here. I think the biggest one we received feedback is the affidavit of collusion. And basically what that means is, am I an authorized user? Is my proposal, I have not been agreeing with a different, working with a different individual. They filled out one, I filled out one, I'm keeping my application going through them, or so forth. You just want to make sure you're keeping that clean. Obviously, you want to be as confidential as possible before submitting. And you can, of course, talk with partners, definitely, but the final application should be confidential. And again, you can have a letter of support as part of it. That's definitely something you'd like to do. Once your authorized representative has signed it, make sure you also get it notarized. That's the only document that requires notary. But you do need that to happen as well. Otherwise, we have this application. You can scan it and then upload the notarized copy. Keep it on, in your own file. If you do get the award, we may actually ask to see the actual original notarized document for our files if the time comes. These are just some general tips for success. Again, use the application document to prepare your answers ahead of time. It's very helpful. You can get support from your colleagues that way. Be clear and specific, making sure that you're reading and following all the guidelines. Following the guidelines, I strongly recommend you understand the statute as well, making sure that you understand what social equity applicants are and if you qualify. I know a lot of people have misunderstandings out in the community about what that word even means, so it's important to look that up. Demonstrate your capacity and your expertise. Show that you are able to collaborate effectively within your own agency or external agencies as well. Are you working with adult education programs? Are you working with schools? Whatever it may be. Be transparent and honest. Focus on high impact as well as sustainability. And then, of course, prepare for reporting and compliance. So now there's a bit of a review period. This is the review and award timeline. I can talk a little bit more about this. We did speak about it before. But June, July will be the time that we, will be sending acceptance or decline letters. And then we're doing the risk assessment, meaning kind of looking at your background, looking at your financial management and so forth. Maybe you've already gotten grants from the state before, which is great. We'll be checking on kind of all those, seeing how that's going for you. If there are some risks, or if you're a brand new kind of green organization, it doesn't mean you're not going to get it. It just means that we will have to go through and make sure we can figure out how we can support you further, and what kind of technical assistance we can provide. And that may include some things, you may include that in your plan about staff development, for example. And then before we actually sign the grant agreement and have it ready for you, we will make sure that your work plan and budget, everything is finalized. That'll be an amended part of the grant agreement. So again, we may request documentation for financial review, just kind of general, very standard documents like the 990s, audit, financial statements. If you had over 75,000 as a 750,000, sorry, as a nonprofit, we need to see that audit. Also, your most recent board reviewed financial statements. For profit organizations, your federal and state tax returns, financial statements, certification that you're not under bankruptcy, as well as a lien disclosure on any assets, things like that. So, and the reason I mention that is that it's, if you don't have that, doesn't mean you're necessarily not qualified, but you may just require more support.